Hi, everybody. Joe Chaffee here on this Monday night, October the 1st, 2018. And it is, uh, in some ways, it's a very busy night. In some ways, it's a very quiet night. By the way, I'm down in Washington, D.C. on a bit of a vacation this week. So live streams are going to continue to be a little bit ad-libbed in the sense that I'm not exactly sure of the times that we're going to be going on a nightly basis. Tonight, 8:30 worked, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. But I'm going to try to get at least one live stream done a day this week while I'm getting a little bit of R&R. So I hope everybody had a great weekend and new start to a new week and a new month. And we have some action weather-wise going on in the southwestern part of the United States. And we'll start off with the watches and warnings that are up across the U.S. at the moment using the National Weather Service's weather.gov page, which is always a good handy tool to have. And we have a big area of flash flood watches up for a good chunk of the state of Arizona, southeastern California, and on up into eastern Nevada and or Nevada, Utah, and even into parts of southwestern Colorado. All of this as a result of Rosa, weakening tropical storm, was Hurricane Rosa, weakening down to a tropical depression as it moves inland over Baja California. And the big issue with this, of course, is going to be the rain that is going forward. By the way, we do have actually a very small area of winter storm warnings up in parts of northwestern Montana and a small area of winter weather advisory. So we are beginning to see appearances of the cool down of the atmosphere, and eventually we'll probably be dealing with larger and larger areas of winter storm watches and warnings as we go through the month and head deeper into the autumn, and eventually, before you know it, we'll be singing jingle bells, and it will be winter time. But Rosa really is the big deal for the Southwest. The rainfall amounts are going to be enough to produce some flash flooding issues, and then most of the moisture is going to wind up staying out to the west. The radar tonight, and we've got the full U.S. radar view here, and bring that up front and center, and you can see the echoes that are going on with respect to showers and thunderstorms. The rains in the southwest, we'll have a closer view of that in a second. Also, you've got some showers and storms across parts of southern Louisiana into southeastern Texas. And we do also have a bit of rough weather going on through the Great Lakes with the next cold front that is approaching. And that front will be moving into the east on later Tuesday and Tuesday night. It's not a strong cold front at all. The air mass behind it is not going to be cooler than the air mass ahead of it. In fact, it's likely that Wednesday and Thursday could wind up being warmer in the east. But at least as far as severe weather is concerned tonight, we've got this marginal to slight risk up in northern Illinois, eastern Ohio, reflecting that area of precip that's moving through the upper Midwest, and also a marginal risk of severe weather in Arizona with what is coming inland with Rosa. Otherwise, a general area of thunderstorms, not a whole lot in terms of geographic coverage now, as you know, it gets tougher and tougher as you get deeper into the month, where you start to see less and less in the way of thunderstorms. But a lot of this, of course, being tropically induced. And on the U.S. satellite loop tonight, we'll bring that up front and center for you. We can see the moisture plume from Rosa moving northward over Baja California. You still can pick out the circulation of the tropical system as it moves inland, and then all that moisture is running northeastward up toward the northern plains, and the cloud chain actually continues through the Great Lakes and on up into southeastern Canada. But those are actually two separate systems. We have some disturbed weather down in the Caribbean, and on the eastern to the right, in the far right, you start to see the western edge of some clouds that are rotating counterclockwise from Leslie. Tropical Storm Leslie, which is probably going to become a hurricane at some point. It is getting better organized. So why don't we at this point start taking a closer look at these tropical systems? And we also have a very interesting one out in the Pacific that I didn't have a lot of time to take a look at yesterday, but we're going to be able to do that today. We're going to start off with the satellite loop here of the West Coast, the Pacific tropics. And when there are three systems on this shot, on the lower right is Tropical Storm Sergio, which is going to become a hurricane probably overnight or on Tuesday. It's very close to hurricane strength now. You can see the circulation of Rosa moving inland there in the northern part of Baja California. And on the lower left is Hurricane Walaka, which is a Category 4 hurricane with top winds of 150 miles an hour, and will be passing very close to Johnston Island, which is an island that you don't really hear too much about. It's out at 170 degrees west. It's way, way out there, but it may strengthen a bit more before it reaches its peak intensity. And Walaka is now turned more toward the north. So this is going to pass, the eye of this is going to pass very, very close to Johnston Island on Tuesday. And there's the Hurricane Center's, the Central Pacific Hurricane Center forecast with Walaka passing. The red dot is where we have the hurricane warning up for that particular island. We're talking about a very, very small target here. And also, it is well away from the Hawaiian Islands. So it is not, except for the fact that it is going to be a producer of some rather rough surf in the Hawaiian Islands. There's no other impact regarding the weather with this. And it takes it straight northward up along 170 west. By 8 a.m. Saturday, it's at 35 north and 165 west, and it is still being carrying a hurricane strength here at this point. But we're talking, again, close to or possibly even a Category 5 when it passes near Johnston Island during the day on Tuesday. We don't often see storms. The Central Pacific does produce a handful of storms in some years, but there are stretches where you can go several years at a time and not see anything come out of that particular zone. They have their own separate names there in the Central Pacific when something forms west of 140 degrees west, which is the Central Pacific's zone of forecast zone that they are responsible for. So the Pacific definitely on fire, and Walaka as a hurricane is impacting the upper air pattern across North America. It is probably going to re-enhance, at least for a little while, a trough down in the along 175, 180 degrees west, which is probably going to keep the ridge in the east stronger for a while longer going forward. Leslie, on now here's a complicated forecast map to sink your teeth into. It is going to become, I think, a hurricane. And when we look at the satellite loop in a second, you'll see that how much different it looks now than from what it looked over the weekend, because it is now definitely purely tropical. Notice that between now, here we are at 5 p.m. Monday, where the X is, to 2 p.m. Saturday, we're talking about a very, very small area of movement here. It's at most about 500 miles. It's just going to meander out there. And that is also helping to reinforce the ridge that is along and just inland of the East Coast. So you've got these tropical systems really having an impact, particularly the Pacific tropics, having a big impact in the overall weather pattern across North America. Hopefully the loop, I've been trying to load this loop up and having some a tough time. So there are some missing frames here. So please forgive me for that. But I just want to at least show you, while it was in visible mode here during the day, you can see that the system that is Leslie, that is up on the upper right of the satellite loop, showing that it looks so much different than it did back days ago when it was in its formative stages, and initially was a subtropical storm. Let me see if I can get a still shot. Won't be a problem. So let me roll back here. We'll bring up the still on this, and nhc.noaa.gov. If you click on the satellite under data and tools, of course, you can always pull these up on your own. I'll bring up a still image because I think that will probably be the best thing we can do right now with regards to seeing what's out there. But you can see Leslie up toward the upper right. We also have this disturbed weather that is down in the Caribbean. It covers a large part of the Caribbean. It is obviously very disorganized, and that's going to be sitting down there all week long. And we continue to see the possibility of something coming out of this later in the week, this coming weekend, or early next week. I think we're going to probably see a general evolution of an area that will be more conducive for development. I've pulled up the upper air. This goes all the way up to 200 millibars. I'm just going to backtrack a little bit to present time. If you look across the Caribbean, where you see all the yellow and orange, those are strong westerly winds in the upper atmosphere, or at least indicative of strong wind shear that is occurring there. So this is why we don't really expect too much to happen there during this week. But as we move through the week and go into the weekend, that shear area gradually shrinks, and you see an increase in the blue and white shading. If you look at the scale on the side, those are the winds. You'll notice that you start to see these blue and white areas. Those are much lighter winds, much lighter wind shear. So conditions are going to become more conducive for something to develop either there, or what the models seem to be showing is a disturbance that forms or moves northward, north of Cuba and the Dominican Republic, and you wind up with some kind of low pressure that develops off the Florida coast or north of Hispaniola or Cuba. I think that the way to look at this is that we're going to have a relatively large area where winds aloft are going to be light enough that we could see something tropical come out of this zone, either in the Northwest Caribbean or perhaps off in the Southwest Atlantic someplace, somewhere off the southeast coast of the United States. So I think it's important that we really keep a watchful eye on what's going to be going on off the southeast coast. And of course, you still have that area in the middle of the Atlantic. This reflects the Leslie, and in the environment that it is in. You'll notice that there's a trough and westerly winds in the upper atmosphere as you go north of Leslie. There are a number of different outcomes in some of these models in terms of where, if and when Leslie winds up getting picked up by a trough in the North Atlantic, or does it sit down there and just meander for days and days and days, and it misses out that trough? That remains to be seen. But I don't think that Leslie is going to be a real player as far as any kind of threat here. But it may, while it's out there in the Central Atlantic, kind of set the table for the rest of the profile in the upper atmosphere south of 35 degrees north. So that's why we're thinking that in this area that we're looking at from the northwestern Caribbean or the western Caribbean on up off the southeast coast of the U.S., where you might wind up with something developing there in the long term. So we'll just, I think at this point, it's the only thing we could really do is just kind of keep an eye on things with respect to that. I just want to go back just to show you on a tighter radar view of what's going on in the Southwest, where we do have this, Rosa coming in with all the rains there in Baja California. And we do have rain for the second day in a row in parts of Arizona. That's going to be increasing in a big way during the overnight and during the day on Tuesday. There's more than likely rainfall amounts of 2 to 4 and maybe some local 6-inch amounts in southern Arizona and southwestern Arizona, and then those amounts will lower a bit as you move northward, as this system ultimately gets absorbed by what is going on upstream. So the radar definitely going to see increased activity there. And the other area, again, just to look at what's happening. Here's the activity tonight across southern Louisiana. You've got some thunderstorms, scattered thunderstorms in parts of Tennessee and Alabama. And then we have this potential severe weather that may develop in the next several hours across the slight risk zone of northern Illinois. And we do actually have some stronger thunderstorms starting to pop up there in southwestern Wisconsin and back up into parts of eastern Iowa. So again, if you're watching this on a replay, it's 8:46 Eastern time is the time of this radar view. So be sure to check your local National Weather Service office for the latest on any severe weather threat by going to weather.gov. We can. I want to take a look at the upper air. All this specific activity is really, again, feeding into the action out in the Pacific in the upper air, and this, of course, having impact downstream. Let me bring that up there for you. It'll just take me a second. And we'll give it, we'll let the maps are going to load here. Let me just quickly check, give you a big collective hello to everybody that's on the chat board tonight. Welcome aboard as always. It's nice to see a good crowd joining us on our weather updates that we try to do here every night. If you're new to my channel, welcome to my YouTube channel, and do hit the subscribe button, which of course is absolutely free, and you can wind up getting notified when these live streams come up, which I try to do at least on a daily basis. But let's back up. The maps are still trying to load. I think we could probably go to this 54-hour shot. And there we go. Okay, so on this view, you know what? We'll do it. I'll put it on the paint box, so at least we can set up what we have in terms of ridges and troughs. So just give me 1 second here while I load. We'll bring that up front and center. And there you have it. Okay, so we'll just move it right toward the middle. So this is your upper air, by the way. This is going to be for Wednesday night. So we're jumping a couple of days ahead of today to get a perspective of where all of this is going. All right, so in the west, trough in the west, and you've got this cutoff, by the way, that's sitting off of Southern California, and there will be, by the way, rains for the west coast while the trough is out there in the west. You've got this upper vortex that's in northern Hudson's Bay, so that's bringing down some colder air into the northern plains. You do also have, by the way, here is Walaka, and you have a strong upper low that is sitting on the north side of the Aleutians in the Bering Sea. So this is going to likely get pulled northward, and over time, it'll at least temporarily is going to feed into that vortex. So the outcome of that will be that you will have a ridge that will continue off the west coast. So that's going to favor a trough along the west coast, and then you have this flat upper high that is covering the Gulf states, and westerly winds in the upper atmosphere. The southern boundary of that gets to just about to New York City. So for areas of the northern mid-Atlantic states into southern New England, this is going to keep weather fronts close. It's going to bring some of them through, and it is going to create some forecast uncertainty going forward. Nothing major, but we are going to see it create some issues when we look ahead. And let's come back to the maps now. There we go. So where is all this upper air taking us as we go forward? the trough in the west stays in the, you still have troughing in the west. You see Walaka just kind of gets absorbed by that big upper low that is sitting just west of the Aleutian. So that feeds the upper low there. You got this deep trough that's being driven southward along 180 degrees west. So you see how the big ridge pops up in the Gulf of Alaska, drops a deep trough. This is for a week from today. Deep trough in the west coast. Big ridge now builds in the east. It's an east-west oriented ridge. And where have we seen this before? Where you've got, you think back to what happened when we had Florence, and you had the upper high just kind of kidney beaning itself around or cradling around lower pressures that are going to be there from the southwest Atlantic down into the northwest Caribbean. So again, this is where something may pop up. Now, over time, the ridge does weaken, and the GFS, for the umpteenth time, tries to start shifting the trough to the east late in the period after day 10. We've seen this before for the last couple of weeks, and it doesn't seem to quite work out, but it's doing it again today. So we'll see. Now, at this point, the tropics in the Pacific do quiet down somewhat, so perhaps that may. The key, I think, is going to be the big keys are going to be the breakdown of that ridge in the Gulf of Alaska and the shifting of the upper low in the Bering Sea and bringing it toward the Gulf of Alaska. This may allow less troughing in the west, slightly more ridging in the west, and the GFS does begin to develop a fairly active-looking vortex in eastern Canada late in the period. Again, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk after that, because we are going to be skeptical of all this until we actually see it getting underway. The European does not go out far enough, but the European is also showing, by the way, the same idea that the GFS is, and that is the fact that you are going to have this ridge building in the west. Come on, there we go. So I'm sorry, the ridge building in the Gulf of Alaska, the trough in the west. You can see it here by Friday. The ridge in the east shifts. You have that trough in the west, kind of a flat ridge that starts to build in the Gulf of Alaska over the weekend as the upper low deepens out in the international date line. This is, kind of a signature pattern in what happens when you've got a deep low at 180. You get a big ridge in the Gulf of Alaska, deep trough in the west, ridge in the east, down, up, down, up. So you got to move these chess pieces over that ridge in the Gulf of Alaska. If you want cold weather in the east, you're not going to get it when you have a ridge like this in the Gulf of Alaska. But this time of year, again, the European also showing that weakness with the ridge so far north, with the upper high sitting literally off the New Jersey coast, and lower heights, lower pressures as you go southward. This opens up a door for potential tropical storm development off the southeast coast of the United States. Now, in terms of the weather going forward this week, we again did say that with the jet stream, the southern part of the westerly winds in the jet stream so close to New York, New Jersey, that it does create some issues with regards to weather fronts. And actually, we do have such an issue tonight. Here's the current surface map. All I have plotted here are temperatures. There's actually a backdoor front that is lying just north of New York City, and you can see the temperatures that have resulted in all of this. In Boston, it's 55. In New York City, it's 72. It's in the upper 50s in the Hudson Valley and up in the Catskills and throughout much of upstate New York and New England. That is in the cooler air, the warmer air, the 60s and 70s from New York City and northeastern Pennsylvania southward. So this front is not going to make it. It's going to be pushed back up as a warm front and pushed northeastward in through New England as the next cold front approaches for tomorrow. And this front, by the way, that's coming through is not anything to speak of. It doesn't have a whole lot of push behind it. There's your high. You've got this high that built up in eastern Canada. How many times have we seen that in the last month. But here's the weather system that comes through tomorrow night with some showers, showers across New England, maybe a couple of showers on the southern end of this. But the front really is very weak and just dies out because now you have the next low. And here's your Rosa moisture, by the way. Watch how it gets all involved with low pressure up in the northern plains, and it just basically gets absorbed, or most of it gets absorbed there. This front will be approaching the East Coast on late Thursday. Now, the high behind this is slightly stronger. So I'm expecting that backdoor from this that front is going to push down into down to Delmarva and northern Virginia. There's not a whole lot of tropical moisture here in the east because of that upper high. So for those of you who are in that area and in the southeast, I'm not looking for any big rains to come out of this going through this week. But you can see the moisture flow in the lower right. That is the tropical moisture flow starting to develop and move northward. And it's from this that the GFS does spin up a low off the southeast coast of the United States. The European has a somewhat similar view. We'll switch maps over so we can at least look at a European surface here. And you see the European also has something there early next week off the southeast coast of the United States with a big high that is up in eastern Canada. Is it going to be there? Is it not going to be there? We'll see. But certainly the upper air conditions are suggestive that something it may try and come out of there. And the Canadian, by the way, is pretty much in the same place with all of this. So when all the models are kind of giving you the same idea, you have to pay attention. Canadian, as usual, has sort of a different perspective on how it plays. That, hang on, it's got to go back a little bit further. The Canadian actually brings it out into the Gulf of Mexico, if you want to believe it. And I'm not ready to say I'm ready to believe it, but there's the Canadian's view of this, where it brings something out of the Northwest Caribbean. I'm going backwards here. Remember, the Canadian always, really likes to spin up everything sometimes, and that is how the Canadian sees it. So forget the specifics with this. The important thing going forward is to remember that the upper air is telling you that conditions are going to become favorable for something to develop. And we'll be of course paying a lot of more attention to this as we go forward. We're going to bring up the chat board, but let me really quick remind everybody that I do have a platform on Patreon where you can read all my website posts, and of course you get additional posts as a Patreon member with regards to weather that are only for Patreon members. And once my vacation settles down, we'll go back to doing daily videos also just for Patreon members. And I will put I'll put up a link for you if you're interested. There's a link on the descriptor to this live stream and on the descriptor to this video. And also occasionally you may see little icons pop up in the corner that could take you also to the Patreon page, should you be interested in subscribing. It's $2 a month, or the price of a cup of coffee. There are some higher tiers if you're feeling more generous. It's a way of helping to support my channel and what I do. So the Patreon link is patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee, and I'm going to add it to the chat board right now. And there you have it. So thank you very much for those of you who have joined. Those that have joined have said some very nice things about it, and they seem to be very happy with it. So give it a try. Again, it's just for $2 a month. All right, on to the chat board. Anthony Orr, our resident statistician, as always, he asked me last night to cover Walaka. I wasn't able to do it, but we certainly did it tonight. The Johnston Atoll, Anthony Orr tells us, is also known as Kamala Atoll to the native Hawaiians, is an unincorporated territory of the United States, currently administered by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It is, again, not a place that you hear about very often. Minimum pressure now 920 millibars, winds max of 160 miles an hour. So Walaka is now a Category 5 hurricane, and I'm going to just double check. I want to just see on the advisory. You can, by the way, if you want to read advisories on Walaka, I'm going to put the link up for that too. You have to go to the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, and that link is now going to be on the chat as well, so you can check this out also. Their Hurricane Center on the Central Pacific is a little bit, sometimes you have to dig around a little bit to find stuff, but um, it is that's where all the information is regarding Walaka. Patrick McGill, the vacation going, doing any fishing? Not on this vacation. I'm down in Washington, D.C., so I'm doing the historical sites. That is how I'm passing my time here and actually having a really good time. Wind shear causes severe weather in the plains, but causes hurricanes to weaken. Right. Well, because of the fact that the hurricane, remember, you're talking about, this is kind of like apples and, you're talking really apples and oranges here. Severe thunderstorms, you have a lot of wind shear, you get very strong winds as you go higher up in the atmosphere, and in the intensity of those thunderstorms, those winds wind up mixing down to the surface. Okay, that's a whole different ball game as opposed to a tropical system that develops a warm core circulation, which is strongest at the bottom of the atmosphere and weakest at the top. So it needs to kind of maintain that structure, and it does that in a light upper air wind environment. So if you've got stronger winds as you go up in the atmosphere with these tropical systems, those thunderstorms, as they try to develop, those thunderstorm tops wind up getting sheared apart. So it's two different things. You're talking about something that develops ahead of a front and does not have a circulation, a broad circulation, as opposed to a tropical system. You sometimes in severe weather, with the strong wind shear in the upper atmosphere and those winds mixing down to the surface, that you get the small rotations that develop, and those are tornadoes, of course. But it's a whole different story when you're looking at the broader perspective of the hurricane, which is a very, very, relatively large cyclone. And by the way, let me just reiterate that when we're talking about these tropical systems and the potential with regards to the upper air conditions going forward, and we are looking ahead down the road in the long range. Remember, there's always a lot of fluidity and variability. There could always be some changes along the way that might make things a little less favorable or a little more favorable. Things may happen faster or happen slower, but we at least recognize that the conditions are there, possibly for something to happen. I don't think Leslie is the issue. So, at this point, Leslie plays a role in supporting that ridge off the west coast, off the east coast, and along the east coast. But I don't. Right now, I mean, from what I'm seeing, it's hard to imagine Leslie coming all the way westward. Storms usually in that position don't make it pretty far to the west. Let's see. Yes, Jeff, you happen to see the picture of my friend Chris Vella, who caught a salmon. He's up at the Salmon River in upstate New York, which is where I was at this time last year. But this year I decided not to do that and go to DC instead. That mad coffee addict, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yeah, we don't, this is not a hype page. This is not a flat earther page. I'm sorry, this is not a hype channel or a flat earther channel or anything like that. We just kind of look at what the weather's going on. I give you what my opinion is regarding where things are going in the upper air, and I try to emphasize the fact that fluidity in weather is what it really is all about. Get used to it. If you approach weather in that way, you'll be a lot healthier for it. Okay, especially if you're a forecaster, because there are no absolutes, and every time you think you have something figured out, something comes along to change it. So try to bear that in mind. We're watching things, and we'll see how it goes. And Tyler Knapp, thank you very much. We did hit the 7,000 subscriber mark this weekend, and I'm very thrilled about that. So my goal is to get it up over 10,000, and hopefully we'll be able to do that sometime soon. Let's see. The model's still showing a big snowstorm in the Rockies next week. Well, Scott Briller, let me take a look. With that trough in the west, we're likely going to see some action there. Why don't we let me get the GFS back up again and take it out a bit further. Hang on. Oh boy. I'm doing this, by the way. I'm at my hotel room, so I'm at the mercy of the signal, which, when you're away, sometimes the signals are not what you would like them to be. All right, got the GFS up. So why don't we look at the west? Hold on, got to get that window up. Did I lose? There it is, window capture. Okay. Boy, do I wish I had a technical director sometimes. It would make my life a whole lot easier. Oh, let me remind you, by the way, a week from today, okay? Our live stream a week from today, if everything goes according to plan, we're going to have Dr. Judah Cohen, who we'll call him the father of the Siberian snow cover growth theory. He is known for his work on that and his work on the stratosphere and the changes in the stratosphere and how it affects the weather across North America and across the Northern Hemisphere. He's going to be joining us, and we'll be talking about what's going on right now that might perhaps give us some clues with respect to the upcoming winter. So on Sunday, low pressure there in Colorado, so it looks like some areas will be seeing their first snows, and that low continues into the plains. Looks a little less developed than yesterday to some extent, but it does produce some snows over Montana and Wyoming a week from now. And then that low runs up into Canada. And again, the big question for the longer term will be, is there going to be a bit of a pattern shift to start to bring in some cooler air masses into the east? And while the GFS is doing that, remember, we're going to be skeptical because it's been doing that for a month now, and these air masses that have been coming down have not lived up to earlier model forecasts because the ridge in the east has been rather strong, and the Pacific tropics really playing a role. By the way, that has really been maintaining the upper air pattern the way it has been. So if we start to see the Pacific, that's going to be your clue, by the way. When the Pacific starts calming down in terms of its tropical storm activity and its hurricane activity, that will probably be the time where we'll begin to seriously see some changes here in the East. How am I going to chat with 10,000 people? Well, thankfully, I would, it'd be nice to have a huge crowd on. Don't get me wrong; it is going to be rather challenging. It's a problem worth having. So I'll just wait to see if it shows up, and if it does, then I'll deal with it then. Exactly how it should be done. Exactly how it should be done. Flat earthers are quite aggravating. Don't forget the geoengineering conspiracy theorists. Yes, the weather controller people. Yes, I know. I understand. Believe me, it is. It's frustrating, but we seem to have cleaned things up here, which is good. Jen, EMZIL2. Hi to you and welcome aboard. You are new to the chat board, and we welcome you. Ruru25. The Pacific has been really busy. Yes, and that again playing a big role in holding the weather pattern the way it's been here in the east. And another super typhoon, William. We'll drop the P. It's a super typhoon in the Westpac. Now, a lot of times those West Pacific typhoons, if they recurve, they can energize upper lows in the Gulf of Alaska and have downstream effects on the weather here across North America. But right now, it's really the Pacific, and Walaka is the one that in the Central Pacific, because that's the one that's going to get absorbed by the upper low that's sitting over the Bering Sea. So that winds up creating the big ridge in the Gulf of Alaska. So I think we have to play that through before we start to see any important changes in the East. So do you think 5,000 subscribers with no videos, do you think this pattern could hold into November with the ridge in the East? Well, look, if the Pacific continues to generate hurricanes out there, and particularly if you keep seeing, if you see another Central Pacific hurricane that winds up going northward and energizes that trough along the international date line, you're going to have problems getting a trough in the eastern part of the United States, and you're going to hold on to that ridge. But no pattern stays intact forever. You eventually all patterns break down. Some take longer than others, and I would suspect that this one is going to break down soon. The Pacific is going to hold the key. The breakdown of the Pacific hurricane activity, once that shuts down, that should at least allow the ridge in the east to flatten out and bring more troughing into the eastern part of the United States. Of course, meteorologists still use the terms El Nino and La Nina. We possibly have a developing El Nino in the central and west Pacific. I have not seen anything that says that it's officially a weak El Nino, but they are still on El Nino watch. That may be a player in the winter as well in the eastern part of the United States, because central and west-based El Ninos tend to, if they're weak, tend to make for colder, stormier winters in the eastern part of the United States. But again, let me emphasize that when we talk about these things, El Nino, La Nina, the Pacific North America Index, the North Atlantic Oscillation, or the Greenland Block, or a whole bunch of other things like that, those are there's no magic bullet. Remember, there's no magic bullet with these things. There's not one thing that we can point to and say we have A, therefore the outcome will always be X. Okay, it's not just A, it's B, C, D, E, and F. Okay, and that could wind up with outcomes of X, Y, Z, W, X, Y, and Z. So we don't, we look at all this stuff, and my approach to forecasting has always been to deal with what's in front of you. Don't focus too much on those large scale events, because on the small scale you can always wind up being surprised. Okay, if you used El Nino as your reason, or La Nina as your reason for not predicting big snowstorms in the east over the last couple of years, you would have a problem. Okay, because they somehow found a way. So there were other things going on. And remember, a lot of this stuff is rather uneven. You see muscles flexing and relaxing, flexing and relaxing. So sometimes you get the ridges to flex, sometimes they relax, and all that change has definitely has impact. Okay, we'll leave it at that at this point for today. Had a pretty good live stream here for my vacation. I did a 45-minute live stream, so I hope everybody enjoyed it. Thank you very much for being here. Once again, let me just do a little shameless self-promotion, okay? For those of you who are interested, you can have much more weather, including more videos that are only for those that are members to my Patreon platform. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on Patreon. It's patreon.com. There's a link on the descriptor to this live stream, or if you're watching it on a replay, the descriptor to this video. And you are more than welcome to join. It's a great way to support my channel and what I'm doing. I'm trying to really just sort of expand the weather experience. It's a $2 a month subscription. And I'll put the link up again for those of you who might be interested. A number of you have already joined and have given me good reviews, and I really appreciate it. If you have any ideas, by all means, share them with me. You can message me directly on Patreon as well, and I do answer those messages, and I try to answer them in a timely fashion. So it's just $2 a month for the base subscription. There's some higher tiers there. But I try to treat everybody fairly and equally. And again, you have access to me. So if you want to shoot me a message, you got a question, you have a thought or an idea or something you want to discuss, you can do it on Patreon, and you don't have to worry about. You're going to be in a crowd of people that it's all about weather, and there's no conspiracy theorists or anything else, anyone else getting in the way. Thank you, Deborah Goins. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Take your time. The Florence the rainfall from Florence was just absolutely insane. And I appreciate the kind words. I just try to put, kind of tell it, you know, tell you what's going on. Again, I give you my opinion on what I think is going to happen, and you know what? There are times that I'm going to be wrong, and I will say so. And we'll look at what happened and why I, missed something. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often. But you know what? I'm human. Rumors to the contrary, and you can't be right all the time. There's just, you're talking about the entire Earth and the entire Earth atmosphere, and trying to figure out what the weather's going to be like for every single spot. That's a formidable task. That is an impossible task. So I just do the best I can. Thank you for the kind words. I really puts a smile on my face. Thank you very much. All right, folks. So here's what's going on. Again, we will be. I'm going to keep trying to do these live streams every night. Next week we'll be getting back to normal. Don't forget, a week from today, we'll have Dr. Judah Cohen on. And hopefully he'll be the first of so many really great guests that we can get on and talk about weather and climate and all the things that drives weather junkies crazy. We'll try to get a list of good guests going forward, and keep your fingers crossed that technically everything works out. And you can check out latest live stream posts on meteorologistjoechaffee.com, which is my website, and my buddy Ben Scott that takes care of New York City weather on nycweathernow.com. Have a great evening, everybody. Thanks again for being here, and we'll see you tomorrow.